या देवी सर्वभूतेषु शक्तिरूपेण संस्थिता नमस्तस्यै 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 नमो नमः. I'm going to start at the very beginning with the conceptualization of God. Is God male or female? Is it he or she? And I'm going to take a very brief outlook on different religions pertaining to this particular question. Well, let me begin with this one. Hindus conceive of God as both male and female, as we know. Lord Krishna in the Bhagavad Gita says, Pitaham asya jagto mata dhata pitamaha vedyam pavitram omkar riksam yajurevacha. Now, this particular verse, I'm sure, is familiar to many of you since you have grown up in India. But Lord Krishna says that I am both the Pita as well as the Mata. So God is conceptualized in Hinduism both as the father and as the mother, Mata and Dhata and Pita. But in Christianity, God is conceived largely as a male figure. I don't know, some of you may be familiar with the very popular Lord's Prayer, which begins with, Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name, thy kingdom come, thy will be done in earth as in heaven. So it goes on like that. So in Christianity, God is by and large conceptualized as a male figure, as a father figure. In fact, Jesus, number 3 on the slide here, he addressed the Creator as my Father. And he often proclaimed that he was the representative of the father figure on the earth atmosphere. In Islam, similarly, although this, in Christianity, this is an image of Jehovah. And again, you can see in Christianity, largely, God is conceptualized as a male figure. Also, God in Christianity is a lawgiver. And if you violate the law, then his injustice will be inflicted upon you. Jehovah is often shown as an angry God, as in this particular image from the Sistine chapter in Rome. Now, in Islam, like I was saying, the Quran is silent with respect to God's gender. They don't acknowledge whether God is male or female. However, what Muslims typically conceptualize God as a male figure. Because when they talk about Allah aapko punish kar dega, not kar degi, Allah aapko maaf kar dega, often the implication is that God is a male figure rather than as a male or a female figure. And also the 4 rightly guided caliphs were all men. Like after Prophet Muhammad, who of course was a male figure, the next 4 one, they're called rightly guided caliphs, Abu Bakr, Umar, Uthman, Ali. They're all male figures. So, strong women characters, Ramayana and Mahabharata. Now, this is a topic which will be discussed in more detail later on, I'm sure, by other writers. But I'll just give you a couple of examples that the character of women in our scriptures in Ramayana and Mahabharata is rather a strong one. Now, I take the very first one, Hanuman meeting Sita when she was in prison in the Ashoka garden. Now, Hanuman presented to her or made an offer to Sita that he could carry her back. All right. And interestingly, Sita refuses that, although she is imprisoned there in the Ashoka garden. And Ravan had given her an ultimatum that unless you come to my bed in 30 days, I'm going to chop you up, make minced meat, and eat you up. With all that kind of a threat, she refuses to go back with Hanuman, making several different arguments that I'll fall off your back, I don't ride on the back of another male other than my husband. But the most important argument she makes is that I want Rama to come, defeat Ravan, take me back. And that's the proper way to do it. So only a very strong person would make an argument like that. Now, in some of the popular characterization that I see on TV, on the Ramayana, they often show Sita as weeping and crying, not having much strength. But I don't see Sita's character like that. Nobody forced her to go to the forest. She insisted. In fact, she insisted that she has to go. Okay. Another is again, there's another representation on that very topic is the character Draupadi. All of you are familiar with the story. She was dragged to the court, but she makes a very important lawyer's argument. She says, "Was I lost? Did you lose me before he lost himself, or after he lost himself? If he lost me after he had already lost himself in the wager, then he had no right to wager me, no right to." So all of this is against dharma. And of course, the arguments were made back and forth. But that again indicates that she was a very strong woman. In fact, some people say that the whole Mahabharata war happened because of the stand that Draupadi took. And there'll be more presentation on the topic later on. Now, Middle Ages, the status of women tends to fall in India. Slavery enters India in a large scale, and this is the beginning of the Muslim era. As you know, Muhammad Ghori comes, established the Ghori rule in Delhi, and girls young and beautiful were taken to slave markets in Bukhara and sold off. Records are available from Muslim writers that how many men and women were enslaved in India and taken over. In fact, in America, we have some professors from Baghdad, from Iraq, and they tell me that there's a section of the population there, they look very much like people from India. So indicating that a lot of people were enslaved in India. The numbers in millions, it's not in thousands. They were taken to the slave markets in Bukhara and Balkh and other places and sold. And also, as a result of that, there's a very good book here, Muslim Slave System in Medieval India by K.S. Lal. If you want to read something on the slave system that happened in India, we need to refer to that. Now, the Mughal harem is another institution which comes into being. These harems were very large. I don't know, even Akbar, who is held up as an enlightened Mughal ruler, had a harem of about 500 women. So that was kind of a very standard practice in the Mughal era. And it's not only the Mughals and the Muslim rulers had very large harems, but also our own Indian rulers, Rajas and Maharajas, duplicated that. For example, this is the famous or well-known Bhupinder Singh of Maharaja Patiala. He's kind of well-known a womanizer, but he had also had a very large harem. Here are some of his chief queens there, 6 or 7 of them. Now, Purta enters in the Middle Ages in India. A lot of the figures that we have, Sita, Draupadi, and some of the other characters, you don't see them veiled. But in the Middle Ages, this is very common. I grew up in North India in the state of Punjab, so this kind of a figure was very, very common. Of course, it's disappearing on a large scale, but nonetheless, Purta enters North India on large scale. Now, this is another kind of a common picture that you will see, not very uncommon even today to some extent. Now, Purta, although is disappearing in India, as you know, I see very few girls wearing any kind of a veil, but in Pakistan, I don't know if you are familiar, this is Prime Minister Imran Khan, and this is his, 4th or 5th wife called Bushra Mir, and she claims to be a Sufi saint, and she dresses like that and properly veiled. In fact, this is another image of Prime Minister Imran Khan as his current wife. This is how she dresses. From what little I have read, this Bushra Khan is quite an influence on the prime minister there. When he met President Trump in America about a year ago, he carried with him the tasvi, that small mala type of a thing, and he was going over the beads on that. I don't know if you've seen that image or not, but she's quite an influence on matters of the state as well. Now, during the independence movement, women play also an important role. I don't want to dwell on that, but I'll show you a few of the images, few of the pictures, female participation. Of course, Rani Jhansi is well known. So is Madam Kama. I think it was Madam Kama who was an associate of Veer Savarkar. When Veer Savarkar, he left England on a ship. Then he jumped in France. I think you probably know that story. And he escaped to French territory, thinking that the British police would have no claim on him on French territory. It was Madame Kama who was supposed to meet him, but unfortunately she didn't show up there on time. So he was captured or recaptured by the British police and then brought to India and condemned 2 life terms, which was highly, highly unusual. The other one is Sarojini Naidu. I don't need to say much on him. And then Kasturba Gandhi. Not only she was the wife of Mahatma Gandhi, but she herself was quite an active participant in the struggle for independence. Aruna Asaf Ali, I think, is well known to the Delhi audiences because she was elected as the mayor many years ago here. I go to Vande Mataram by Bankim Chandra Chatterjee. Now, in India, we conceptualize our country as Mother, Mata, okay, Bharat Mata, this is what we call. Not in every country do they call their land as the motherland. In Germany, for example, they call Germany as the fatherland. In some of the other European countries, their country is known as the fatherland. But we call it, motherland, Matra, Bhumi. And Vande Mataram, a well-known national song, is addressed to India as the mother figure. Now, these are a couple of the important passages there, and the translation of this is done by Sri Aurobindo. I'll read the last paragraph there. It says, "Thou art Durga, lady and queen, with her hands that strike and her swords of sheen. Thou art Lakshmi, lotus throne, and the muse 100 tones, pure and perfect without peer, mother, lend thine ear." So I have an image of Sri Aurobindo over there. To my reading, from what little I've read on this, they say the Congress government, they did not include this particular passage in the Vande Mataram that we accept as a national song. They accept the rest of it, but this particular passage is not included in the official doctrine. That is a little bit of a sad story. Now the contemporary scene, I'm going to spend a little bit of time on the contemporary scene, what's going on. Voting in India is problematic. Why? Among the educated in India, voting is depressed. I'm going to spend a little bit of time on that. Hindus vote in lower numbers as compared with Muslims and other minorities. And here are the data I want to present to you. So the Hindu voting rate is the lowest. Sikh 81%, Muslim 70%, Hindu 60%. So for whatever reasons, I guess there are several different reasons, Hindu voting rate is the lowest in the country. So if you think that Hindus are disenfranchised, they don't, even though they are majority of the population, their concerns are not properly heard of. One reason for that is that Hindus don't vote at the same level as some of the other minorities do. In fact, the voting rate also is inverted in India. The more education you have, lower the voting rate, as you can see from here. Prime primary or middle school 83%, college 57%, postgraduate 41%. Now this is highly unusual in the global scene. In the United States, where I teach and I live, the voting rate increases with education. Higher the education, higher the voting rate. Now this is how it is. In fact, the next slide will show you that. But in India, it's inverted. The more educated, higher the income you have, higher the education you have, lower the voting rate. And that is, I think, problematic. That's really sad. I show the comparison with the United States. The first column, voting rate increasing from 38% to 43%, 79 to 84%. So if you are postgraduate in America, 84% of the people would vote. In India, on the other hand, you can see it's only about 42%. So I think we ourselves are to blame. If people with higher education don't vote in the same percentage, the same number, obviously we don't seem to count to the same extent. This is in the US, higher the education, higher the income, higher the voting rate. In India, the pattern is like that. Higher the education, higher the income, lower the voting rate. It's inverted. Now here are some images that I picked up from the internet. You can see, women voting. I mean, from the images that you see, from the pictures that you see, they're hardly college-educated women. I think, they're ordinary, working-class kind of women is the images that I see in large numbers. And as I indicated, Sikhs have the highest voting rate in India. I think I showed you about 81%. Well, here's an image of that. You can see how many of them are lined up. I don't see very many Hindus lined up to the same extent. So this is kind of really sad. Now, Hindus should learn from the Sikhs. Sikhs are active internationally, especially in Canada. So I'm going to make a few comments of Hindu and Sikh participation internationally, especially in Canada. Canada is a country with a population of about 35 million, 3.5 crore. And Hindus and Sikhs are about 1.5 million. But 50% of the Indians in Canada are Hindu, 50% of the Indians in Canada are Sikh. So Sikh and Hindus are kind of equally divided in Canada. However, in terms of the political participation, Sikhs do remarkably well in Canada. Now, here is Harjit Sajjan, defense minister. Now, can you believe that in Canada, you have the defense minister, a turban wearing Sikh is the defense minister in Canada. In fact, there are 5 or 6 members of the cabinet. And as I say, their number is more or less the same as the number of Hindus in Canada. But they get organized. See, Gurdwara is a functioning institution. Unfortunately, our temples don't do the same kind of a job as the Gurdwaras do. Now, here's another image. He is Jagmeet Singh, leader of the New Democratic Party in Canada. This is the 3rd largest party. There's the Liberal Party, which is the largest, then the Conservative Party, and the 3rd largest party is the Democratic Party, New Democratic Party. Now, because this time around, the Liberal Party of Trudeau did not win a clear majority, so they have to bargain for a coalition government. So the Jagmeet Singh is playing a very important role. Now, 15 Sikhs MPs elected in Canada in 2015. Okay, the number of Hindus is, I think, 3 or 4. Okay, so now, it's Prime Minister Trudeau. Okay, he was in India, I think, about a year ago, or 8 or 9 months ago. It's very important for a Canadian leader to go to the Golden Temple. Here you see Trudeau, wearing a headscarf there and visiting the Golden Temple. I don't know if he went to Akshardham here. I don't know if he went to any Hindu temple. But, they know who support they need. Now, here is Prime Minister Trudeau, his wife and his daughter, as you can see, roti bel rahe hain. I mean, it's really amazing, the influence of Sikhs in Canada is, truly amazing. Unlike Hindus, because we simply don't do the same kind of a job. Okay. So this is kind of a comment on my part. Says, seek ye first the political kingdom, then all others shall be added unto it. I think historically, Hindus have given up on the political arena. I mean, this has been going for 1,000 years, Muslims came here, we didn't quite stand up to them. They established the kingdom and the Mughal Empire and so on and so forth. Even though we have good models in Ramayana, fighting for justice, in Mahabharata, standing up to your rights. For some reason, maybe some of the philosophies, negative philosophies, ब्रह्म सत्य जगत मिथ्या ये जगत मिथ्या है इसमें कुछ नहीं है छोड़ो इसको maybe some negative philosophies took hold of India in the 8th century. Thereafter I think perhaps we declined. And then, of course, it continues not only under the Muslim and the British calm, and even presently, Hindus are disempowered. They really don't exercise, they don't have the same kind of political power. So, one more comment, and that is India's fractured electorate. On the average, 8,000 candidates for 543 seats. That means there are 15 candidates running for each parliamentary seat. What's the implication of that? The implication of that is that you need only about 20 to 25% of the vote to win. Well, if you need only 20 to 25% of the vote to win, an entrenched minority, if they have a block voting, about 15% or so, they exercise a great deal of influence. It's not just two political parties, you have 15 different political parties competing. So, and this is another problem that we have. Too many political parties, and all you need is about 20-25% of the vote to win. And so a minority can exercise a great deal of influence. And of course, you know who the block voting is. Hindus are politically weak in their own homeland. BJP and Hindus. Now, Conrad Elst is here in the audience. I saw him. He made an observation that even the BJP is in awe of the secularists. Don't expect them to do a great deal. They're a political party. They need to stay in power. They know where the votes are. So they cannot quite negate. So we must need to rejuvenate ourselves. We must need to learn from our compatriots. We must organize together. We must build temples which are not simply Murti Puja. We go and make some donations, but they have to be institutions where people are brought together and appeals are made not only in terms of religion but also on larger social and political issues. So this is essentially few of the comments that I had to make.